All right, Rick, it's lovely to see you, my friend. I love any opportunity to talk to you. It's unfortunately all too often just at dive shows. Thanks so
Sure, and
much for
you're
making the
very
time to
much
talk.
in demand, aren't you? So like it's
No,
never.
no, mostly you. And I was about to congratulate you. You've become quite an international celebrity. How does it feel to be diving's premier international celebrity?
Well, I'm not really very comfortable with stuff like that, but
I know, that's
it's
why
all
I asked.
it's all for the right reasons, and it's good.
Yeah, indeed. And I know you've talked about this whole story so many times that I'm not going to say anything except thanks very much on the behalf of the diving community and the cave diving community in particular for making us look so good and for doing such an amazing thing for the human species. It was really very cool. And I know many of us admire you for that work you did. So thanks very much.
Thanks, Jack.
Everybody who's listening, you all know about the famous Rick and his great efforts to rescue the children in Thailand, and we're all super happy about that. So what I did bring Rick on today is because I know he's very happy to discuss with us the pros and cons of standardization. And so I have an article outlining what I see as the value of standardization. I do try to balance it a bit, but I really wanted to bring Rick on because I was hoping he'd give me a little pushback and tell me I was a bit daft and standardization was useless. So tell me, Rick, what do you think based on the article? Do you do any standardization? Do you think it's worth it at all? Or what are your thoughts?
I'm a bit hypocritical. Yes, I do think standardization is good. But on the other hand, we don't do it as much as other groups. When I refer to we, I'm sort of referring to a tight-knit group of Jason Mallison, myself, John Valanthan, and sort of pretty much, as you've mentioned, the Thai rescue divers and our sort of diving. Mm-hmm. So we have some standardization, and we have become more aligned in recent times. I mean, our main reason is we dive to explore caves, as do you. In Europe, our caves aren't quite as uniform as in northern Florida. And every cave has a unique set of challenges or obstacles to overcome that require a completely different gear configuration and setup. And so we modify, and we have non-standard equipment. I look at people, for example, at the Vassell. There might be 30 people there with twin sets going and having a lovely fun dive. And I look at them and I think, oh, I wish I could do that. That looks just so easy.
You can, by the way.
Well, that's funny you should say that. I can't. I did go to the lots a couple of years ago, and we had one set of gear each. And look, we enjoyed the dives; they're all fun, but there was something lacking. We weren't there to sort of push or explore anything. It wasn't quite the same. So I totally get it for people just want to go cave diving and enjoy the cave. It simplifies things and it just makes everything easy. Whereas we go to the extremes of making everything's complicated.
So you make it hard on purpose so you get more joy out of it?
Well, no, it actually becomes self-defeating, I would say. And the absolute limit is Potholes, it's the cave that Jason is still exploring. The amount of gear and the modification to gear and the specialization of gear for that is sort of on another level, I would argue.
Mm-hmm. I think it's a good argument, and I think I'd just like to make 2 points. One, I think the smaller the team and the more regular the dive buddies, the more flexibility can be managed because you and Jason know each other really well, and even if you dove completely separate kit, you've dove so much over so long a time that you know how his stuff is supposed to be. And if you took on a totally new buddy with a gear you were completely unfamiliar with, then it would be a little bit harder for you to know what was going on with that diver, which I see as one of the big advantages of standardization across teams.
So I would also argue that whilst we have been a bit perverse in all having different gear, it has come about because we've sort of started diving in different times. I was diving 10 years or 15 years before Jason, then he came along and he didn't want to sort of buy gear maybe that I had, and then John came along and sort of tried to fit in. I mean, so he bought his own set of gear and modified it. So and why, I didn't. There were monetary constraints back in the day, and I couldn't go and buy a whole new set of gear just to align with John, who bought it, much sooner than myself.
Yeah. So you would have been happy to standardize if they matched your standard.
Well, I mean, I'll tell you a funny story that is absolutely ridiculous, and this stands out on our ridiculousness, and I'm happy to say it. All our heating systems between the three of us had different plugs. None of them were cross-compatible, and that was identified as totally ridiculous.
You guys realize the little interoperability in that critical life support area might be useful.
Yeah. I mean, but now, if I went to Pothwastle in August, only as a support diver. If Craig Shallon, the Australian vet, he was there.
Yep.
And the other people had gear that I thought was most suited to that cave. This wasn't available or around a few years ago, or even done. I would not now go, although I could. I would not go and buy that equipment just to do that.
Yeah.
I'm not diving that often, and it seems like a huge investment in money. But things move on, and you can't always justify moving along with it.
That makes perfect sense. So if I were to, but let's just for discussion purposes, from a philosophical perspective, remove money, pretend you had all the money you possibly wanted, and you could fund you and your dive buddies. Would you have a mostly standardized system, or would you think you'd still have a lot of differences between the team members?
I think there would be some standardization. Yeah, I think it's clear what works well. But I mean, I read your article on how you took a lot of time modifying your gear for the Panhandle caves, for optimization and of the dive. Well, if every cave's different, you haven't got enough time to quite do that. But
yeah, and what we've gravitated to is, let's just call several standard starting points.
Yeah,
and so side mount has a standard platform that is a starting point, which is derived from the back mount, meaning that we try to keep the hoses running in a similar way, so your responses to what shut off what reg is the same. And of course, if you go to single tank or no mount, or you have something even more elaborate than that, then there are modifications. So I argue that we maintain a strong high-level standard, and then specialization where needed. You seem to fall into the mostly specialization needed compartment.
I would agree with that. I mean,
and do you think?
Go on. I've got one other. Talking about side mount, we had a side mount system that was in operation in the UK from like the early 1960s right through to late 80s.
Yeah.
And then we looked at what guys were doing in the USA, and it was a much better system, and pretty much all the cave diving group divers modified within a space of a year to that system, and that did. I mean, the little tweaks were somewhat different, but the whole system changed to where you had an underarm elastic and a clip on your side. The normal way of carrying a side mount or stage cylinder. I mean, before it was basically clamped to us. You couldn't pass cylinders off. You couldn't swap it round. You couldn't. It was getting in. It was awkward. That. People are always on the lookout for the optimum system,
a better way to do it if you can find it.
It actually revolutionized some of our diving and some of the projects we were on.
How different do you imagine your configurations? Because you mentioned a couple times that each cave's different. So I'm trying to picture that. Like if I have a basic side mount system that's pretty flexible because I can add and remove tanks, do you really fundamentally change that side mount configuration from one cave to the next?
No, but I'm really referring to really challenging caves, of which there are in the lot, where you've got to be lightweight. There was one cave, it was too small in places for a back mount rebreather, but it was a very long penetration. So we had chest mount rebreathers because we knew we had to take them off to go through squeezes. So that was a unique configuration. I know we've got the side mount. That's exactly the same. Yes, for sure. a clip and an underarm elastic. That's
yeah.
not.
So you would say that for the most part, you're using a side mount configuration that varies from cave to cave by perhaps adding something to it, like a chest mount rebreather, for example.
Yeah,
would that be the main kind of changes?
Or now a side mount rebreather
Mm-hmm.
on one side. I mean, things are always adapting. I mean, obviously for the long dives we've done, we've got a back mount rebreather, a side mount rebreather, and then your stage tanks.
Right.
It's often not only the underwater environment that's creating the problems, it's above water, because don't forget we do multiple sump diving, and that creates its own issues, whether you have to go up ropes or down ropes or just dry restrictions.
Do you guys tend to use the same gas mixes between yourselves?
Absolutely not.
Okay. You're the perfect guy, Rick. I had a feeling. So I would argue all the standard gas and everything, and you're like, absolutely not. I don't want to dive the same gas as my buddy. I love it.
Well, I have to say, back in the day, in the Vassell, we had a trimix. we opined the optimum mix, and that was largely based on how much helium we could afford. That really was it.
Did you have like a throttle, or did you have like just a fixed budget and you just kind of adjusted accordingly?
Jason still uses it. Don't put that, please. Jason still uses that mix.
Would Jason be embarrassed? Do we actually need to edit it out, or will he be a good spirit about it? Because it's not a particularly provocative statement.
Let me think about it.
All right.
So this is going out as a podcast.
It'll be on In Depth, as part of we have a magazine at In Depth, the digital media, and there's a regular article I write for that, and so it'll be part of that.
Okay.
So you can let us know, and if people are coming back in after the censored part, we're sorry. Rick just decided, but otherwise, you know that it's not that controversial. So we were just talking about adjusting mix, and so that just depends on a person's budget and the particular week, and then.
And well, not so much now, but also what efficiency of mixing whatever's in your cylinders. We don't dive very often. We're not constantly mixing gas.
Yeah.
So we'll pick. I mean, it won't differ very much, but it's not standardization.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's like, sure, you'll have oxygen, sure, you'll have nitrox 50. So, that's the obvious gas mixes. So that's.
Yeah. But you might have 20-something or 20-something or 50-something% helium, depending on what you had previously and what your diet, what was going on that week.
And also what worked for you previously.
Mm-hmm.
So that gives you confidence. If you use that gas and it all works, that's fine.
Yeah, then you're more comfortable with it.
Yeah.
And have you guys done? I know you've done some pretty fantastic dives, and I've loved some of your presentations over the years and seeing some of the places you've been. Have you done much? With the exception of Thailand, where you did have. Well, I mean, even then you were a relatively small team. Have you done much coordination across multiple teams working on? So it's mostly your small group, right?
It's mostly small groups. Mm-hmm. It is.
Is that by preference or just happenstance? Is it how it evolved, or do you not like to work with larger groups, or you just kind of got in a habit?
It's back in the early days exploring the Vassell in France. We did have quite large groups, and we actually found it was counterproductive. Mm-hmm. There were different standards of diving. I'm not referring to equipment, but it just seemed it always seemed easier to manage small groups, and it was more effective. And you brought up Thailand. I thought that was the way forward in Thailand. Small, tight-knit groups that you could trust, and you didn't need to prescribe a whole load of rules and regulations for, because you could trust them to make the decisions.
Yeah, it makes plenty of sense. And, the variability associated with different unknown teams can be a pretty significant problem in many cases. I know when I did some early diving with Shek before his untimely passing, and he joined some of our dives, and he was really excited because we had, quite a team of integrated people who dove at a common level. And I asked him, I said, "You're almost famous for solo diving. So, what's the story?" He's like, "Well, if I could find a really capable team that I could rely on, I'd be happy to dive with dive
Sure.
buddies. But everybody calls the dive, so I just keep going by myself." Which is my segue into team diving. But go ahead. Did you have a comment on that?
Well, I was going to say that we most of the caves we've explored, we've managed to do it with these small team numbers, like 2 or 3 exploratory divers and a few less than a handful, maybe only 2 or 3 helpers. That has always held us in good stead.
Yep.
There's only been often where other previous explorers have used massive pyramid teams pushing people to the front. We've only been defeated once. We've never been back. I don't think we ever will, but there's one cave that our system did not work and you would need a team.
Before we wrap up, I want to actually ask you one last question, which is a nod to my article next month, which is about teams.
Yeah.
And I know you've been quite happy to dive solo over the years, but you usually tend to dive with smaller groups. Do you have a strong preference there either way?
No, again, I think it depends on the cave. If we're diving with others, it's more for the above water sections rather than the underwater sections. Underwater, we tend to, we might have someone with us, but we tend to be more of a solo diver ethos.
In the kind of mentality, meaning you might bump into each other every now and then, but it's not a rigid stay together thing. Certainly in some caves we might be a little bit more aligned for the benefit of joint lights and things like that. But the ethos is one could turn if they have to, and the other would go on. But the sort of when we're in a group of divers, that's more for regrouping in the dry section. That's more important to have someone there than underwater, in our opinion. Yeah. And so underwater, you generally don't see much value to, redundancy of equipment and brain power and support and this kind of stuff? Or...
Well, I would argue, even though, if you're diving with a regular buddy, you can communicate underwater. Complex things are difficult to resolve underwater. So we're totally self-sufficient in everything because, as I said, if people may and have turned back for whatever reason. So everybody needs to have enough self-sufficiency for themselves.
Do you imagine that decreases risk or increases risk from your perspective, or relatively neutral?
I think it's neutral. I don't. We put a great, and we would confer amongst ourselves to make sure no one's gone a bit out of an outlier with their equipment, to make sure everyone really has got the means to get back. And
this isn't the topic of our discussion here, but as I won't bother you again for next month's article, I'm having fun with it anyway. And do you see any value if a person's having a bad dive or difficulty, unusual failures? Wouldn't you imagine they would be better off having a dive buddy with them in support?
I think it depends on the person. Yeah, I'm not saying we're in any way normal. But,
okay. Live from here. You're coming out of the closet, mate. I'm not normal.
I think yes, but our ethos again is we're there to explore the cave, and the person at the front will go on and do it, and the other person, sure. There have been instances where it's quite moderately serious, and of course the other person would help. Of course they would, and help them out. They would do anything to get them out, but those sort of situations don't really occur. Yeah, fair enough. My last question on this topic then, do you enjoy having somebody there with you? Is it a shared social experience, or do you just assume be alone and enjoy it on your own? There's 2 answers to that. Some of my best cave dives have been in a bunch of people. I recall a dive with Dr. Richard Harris, and I think Lee Bishop was there. There was 5 of us in Cocklebiddy in Australia. Super big passage, super clear, all just scootering along, all our lights everywhere. Absolutely one of the best cave diving experiences ever. Yeah. But when you're in murky water and sort of trying to find the way on, I find it a distraction.
Mhm.
Whatever they're doing, they're searching one way, you're searching another. I find that a distraction. And that sort of turns off my internal spatial awareness.
Uh-huh.
And there's been a
Got it.
few occasions where I haven't found the way on because there's been someone else messing around.
Uh-huh. All right. We can blame them for that lost
Yeah.
lead.
Yeah.
I think that I guess I asked that because I find in addition to the kind of shared collaborative effort, I enjoy the social component of sharing a unique dive with someone. And I also find that support to be generally useful, but I 100% agree with you that everybody has to be individually capable. I argue just the synergy of two individually capable people is more than the sum of the parts, but
Sure.
I respect the opinion you're representing.
And I would agree in some way with that. And in certain circumstances, Jason and I have dived together, and helped each other, leapfrogged, and I would agree with that. But those situations are rarer than the opposite one, where another person is too much.
Yep. Okay. Fair enough. So if you're going to pick a buddy, make it a good one.
Absolutely, totally. Totally.
All right, Rick, if you can hang on for a sec, I'd love to just catch up on a few personal things with you and say hi. And I just want to tell our audience, thanks very much for joining. It's been a pleasure talking to Rick Stanton here today about standardization. Thanks so much for joining us, Rick. Take care.
Thank you, Jarrod.